sit and you're going to halt construction longer while some government agency does some fucking investigation to see whether or not you may or may not be allowed to build this project you've invested millions in, or whether or not it's just going to slow you down. What you're talking about is money, right? Like you're talking about massive amounts of money that not only occur to this specific company, but occur to every single company, every single town, every single property owner when they're determining whether or not they want to build geothermal or build hydroelectric, right? Or build.
Fog being near its construction site. Conservationists have argued that while green energy is essential, it can't come at the price of extinction. Do you think important construction projects should have to consider the impact to wildlife? Does it matter what type of wildlife or what type of construction? What about projects that interfere with human life, such as Native American sacred practices? Or is progress, in quotes, more important than any of those considerations? Yeah. So, you've never heard of this, I'm sure. There's a frog, a very tiny frog. Apparently, it's like quarter sized.
It's a
Um,
toad, by the way.
Toad, excuse me. Thank you for
God,
correcting me there.
thank God that dude. Sorry, that changes my opening argument entirely. It's fucking oh shit. Okay. Sorry.
It's a very tiny toad, excuse me, but and it apparently just lives in this one particular area, where this proposed geothermal power plant will be placed, and it just got to the endangered species or risk of extinction list or something like that. I don't know. So it looks like this land's protected. Now the power plant has to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to get started, right? Part of it is proving that it won't cause irreparable damage to the environment. And so I want to know, does this make sense to you? And yeah, like if not, how would you change things? We'll start with Lactoid.
Yeah, so this is a tough topic for me because, I ultimately don't want the toad to die. I think the toad looks pretty cool, but I want to bring up a few principles, right? The first principle here is I think the intention is not necessarily the same thing as the results. Often, government programs to protect endangered species that are intended to protect these species may actually encourage landowners to kill those species that are considered endangered in order to prevent having draconian government restrictions imposed on their land. Right? I mean, it's much easier to kill the endangered species, hide what you did, as opposed to have to deal with all of the pretty extensive ramifications that come from the Endangered Species Act. There's also a real question as to the efficacy of the Endangered Species Act. There's some numbers that are touted around, but only about 2% of the species placed on the endangered species list actually recover. And this actually may only be so high because of certain data errors when it comes to the process when they put species on the list, as opposed to when they take them off, meaning that a lot of the quote unquote recovered species may actually not be endangered in the first place. So it could be that like the efficacy of this government program is not nearly as high as people say it is. All that being said, I think saving species is a laudable goal, but we can't disregard people's rights over themselves and their own property. After all, every individual is also unique and their experience is irreplaceable. I would advocate for ecological drives similar to the Go for Tortoise initiative, which raises private funds to purchase easements or improvements over land to protect that habitat. As to the power plant specifically, and that was mentioned in the article, I think there's a real question here is if climate change is as much of a threat as we think, then perhaps it is worth the trade-off to make this shift towards green energy to potentially endanger this toad. There is no guarantee that this will actually cause the toad to go extinct, and there's nothing stopping conservation efforts to mitigate any impact from the geoplant. And we can't discount the salvation of mankind and many other species for advancement. The sacred tribal part, I think, is irrelevant and just a distraction from the actual important issues.
Hey, interesting. That, please.
So, first, yes to everything Lactoid said. Second, fuck the toads. I don't care about them. There's no evidence to suggest that this toad is essential to the biodiversity of that biome. That we're gonna have like some form of collapse if this toad is gone. Second, fuck BLM. And this time I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm talking about the Bureau of Land Management. Third, if you have a sacred Native American site that has been homesteaded in some degree, right? There is like some monolithic structure there or something. Yeah, sure. Right. Like we should protect and preserve that because there's an original private property owner. It may be difficult to find who that was. But this idea that like every bit of land is sacred because they did something at some point there. Yeah, fuck off. I don't care. Um, Ultimately, what you're talking about is the EPA and government institutions burying geothermal technology in red tape, despite the fact that geothermal technology is some of the most green energy that is available with the lowest wildlife impact. It's more green with less impact than solar and wind. And it just so happens to be that oil and gas companies, get all of these wonderful subsidies for the solar and wind projects that they own, when we all know that if you're actually for green energy, you support four things in descending order. Number one, fracking. Fracking is green energy because it lowers the cost of oil and gets us off of coal. Number two would be hydroelectric. But unfortunately, you have issues like, deltas and waterways that can be damaged. Number three, geothermal. And number one, if you are for green energy, you should be doing everything you can to support nuclear. Honorable mention to things like battery technology, carbon capture, biofuel, things that need research but may provide solutions in the future. To me, this feels like government overreach, and that you just happen to not see a lot of in wind farms that destroy local bird populations and migratory birds, but we don't care. And it is rare. But honestly, the government should just get the fuck out of the way. Who gives a fuck if this toad dies? I don't.
Thank you. KOE.
All right. A couple of things to keep in mind here, folks. I've got two thoughts in my mind, and it's kind of like a Louis C.K. bit where he goes, of course, but maybe. And to me, it's like, of course, we should try to preserve every unique genetic form of life on this planet. But maybe building a geothermal plant or like a couple of solar panels or a few windmills or whatever causes your species to go extinct, maybe it was just kind of time. It's the unfortunate reality because we as humanity have this very odd snapshot of nature, and we imagine that it should be in perfect stasis for all time from when we came onto the scene. And we don't really understand the idea that extinction is actually far more common than speciation in nature. And a great example of this, the wolves have been getting wiped, like their numbers go down and down and down here in North America. And it's not like it to anybody with any basic biological knowledge or any kind of knowledge of how nature works. Yeah, they're going out because the coyote is taking over that niche better than they ever could, and they're adapted better than they ever could. And so over about a few hundred more years, maybe a few thousand more years, yeah, we're probably not going to have wolves in nature anymore because the coyote is taken over. So that's just one good example. But in terms of hunting rights, I have actually argued on other panels before that I believe that native and indigenous hunting rights should be maintained. I'm somebody that does maintain a significant amount of wildlife habitat, and I do use some of it for hunting. And so, yeah, that is very much something that needs to be maintained. You have to actively have the idea that I want to maintain this wildlife habitat. And if native tribes wish to do that, I don't think we should develop there for obvious reasons. But there is a point, like, to me, I always talk about to my friends from California. It's like, well, you're going to run out of water soon. You should probably dam up all that water before it escapes out to the ocean. And then I hear, well, the environment. What about the salt levels in the ocean? And what about the fish? What about the? Well, I don't know. I'm going to leave it on this. Coming from Team People here, us, and our conversion of fuel to energy is what decides the totality of life on this planet. So if we're fucked, everything else is fucked with us, whether we want to admit it or not. So, folks, these lips of mine, they can speak no evil. And with that, I yield back to you beautiful people.
He's so great. Let's go to Wick.
It comes down to this, right? What benefit will this plant, this geothermal facility, give to us, and what benefits are there for delaying it in order to make sure that it does as little harm as possible to the local environment? I think that when the question is, should we take into account the damage it might do to local wildlife? Absolutely, we should take it into account. But it should not be the end all be all, right? We can tolerate and accept some harm if the benefits outweigh it. And as we know, climate catastrophe isn't going to be localized to a single area, it's going to be global in nature. And if we have to put some species at risk in local areas to save life as we know it, literally on a global scale, that's okay, right? Now, obviously, we need to be smart about this. We need to take our time, right, to an extent, but we don't have all the time in the world. So at a certain point, we have to make a decision. We have to go with our best, uh, put our best foot forward, and we're going to make mistakes, but we correct for those mistakes. So my take on it is this. Um, I think that geothermal, as was said, is a very green technology, right? And it is a tool we have in our tool belt, and we should not simply discard it because it might have some short-term harms. And absolutely do everything we can to preserve existing species, but the bigger goal is to conserve, the planet. So there we go. That's my take.
Corey.
Yeah. Well, firstly, whether this is a coincidence or not, I don't know. But it's a very timely topic to cover since COP15 is going on like right now. And that's I'm gonna put the link into the Twitch chat and in the StreamYard chat, taking place in actually Quebec, Canada, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. This is a UN summit specifically about biodiversity loss and how to solve biodiversity loss, which this very much is in line with that, because you can be team people, but without any other biodiversity, I don't think there is a team people. I'm reasonably sure without any other life forms aside from humans, like humans cannot exist, but I might be wrong about that. And yeah, I think this is really tricky, where it's like to answer the prompt, where do I think that it's important construction projects should have to consider their impact on wildlife? Yes, absolutely. I think we have to protect life forms like Doobie, the toads and the frogs, for sure, because Doobie is super important and crucial and unique. So does it matter like what type of wildlife or what type of construction? Again, to Wick's point, the costs and benefits, it seems like this project is like trying to reach a compromise, and I'm all for the compromise. I'm not for the sake. I'm not for green energy solutions at all costs, and the environmental impacts have to be taken into account. And it seems like a reasonable compromise is being made, and so I'm pretty much whatever like erring on the side of preserving diversity is the direction that I go in, and that's in the direction of preserving this toad and just biodiversity in general. And I'll leave it there for now.
Abby. You're muted.
Hello. Sorry. My kids came in, so I had put the thing up. Sorry. If push comes to shove, I'm going to side with the geothermal plant and not the toad. But I want to be very, very clear about something. When it comes to biomes, it falls along with what Corey was saying. Without biodiversity, we don't actually stand a chance. And when you're looking at a green power plant, overall, what we're looking at is already a nature cohesive solution, but what we need to be looking for is a nature based solution. This toad, from what I can tell, I looked everywhere because I wanted to have a little more information on the toad itself. There's got to be something about it that had it fast track onto the list, because it's like the second time it's happened in decades. That's not very normal. They might need to be studied. I'm not really sure what's going on with the toad, but it's very strange that it got onto the list, the list like that. So there's something going on in this biome that we actually need to be incredibly aware of. And I'm sure there's a way we can make the geothermal plant, like there can be like a preserve area, something that only has access to workers, something to that effect that might help us out, because it's also being predated by a larger toad. So between climate change and this larger toad, it could have gone extinct anyway. Like, for instance, nobody hate me. I don't think we should be trying so hard to keep panda bears alive. I know they're adorable. I know they're so cute, but they just don't have it in them. Evolution has also led to extinction in many different cases. So I would caution us, like, throwing everything to the wind for an endangered species, but we should be wondering, why is this particular toad on this site? Why is this the only place that it exists in the world? We also need to be aware that when it comes to medicines, when it comes to things we can learn about biodiversity and what kind of fungi we have in the area, amphibians is the first place we go to. We always have, and I think we always will. So I think we really need to be careful and go forward very carefully. But I do firmly believe that there is a nature-based solution for us if we're already doing something that's copacetic somewhat to nature itself with a plant. So I would say that, yeah, I'll side with team people on this one, but we don't know what fungi are going to disappear. We don't know what medicines we could have had. So we should be very, very careful going forward.
Aiko.
Okay, so let me just say, let me just start out by saying if we're going to go to Wick's example of what are the benefits on either side of this and how do we weigh those. When I said that decades ago, I started thinking about it, and now I've come up with an answer for myself, which is this is a 12 megawatt facility. So I take the point that this is an existential issue if we're talking about climate change, but a 12 megawatt facility isn't particularly large. I think it'll eventually get to 60 megawatts if it's allowed to grow, also not particularly large. We could maybe just utilize the hot air that comes from Phil's panel openings and make up for those 12 to 60 megawatts, like just from that alone, right? But also, I shouldn't alienate Phil because he's going to do me a favor here in a minute. But also, we're not talking about shutting this thing down necessarily. We're talking about 240-day review. So now we're talking about a 12 megawatt facility opening up 240 days later than it could before, so that we can study what's going on here. And my last point is that this facility is sitting at the edge of a wetland. And what's really they're trying to protect is the whole wetland. And the frog is sort of one example of that. The Native Americans who regard the water as holy and use it in their rituals is another example of that. And this thing has like something that's going down into the ground to go get the hot water that it's then going to bring up. And that water isn't just sitting beneath the facility, but it's underneath the entire wetlands. And so anyway, to illustrate that, I was going to show you a clip from Daniel Day-Lewis's movie There Will Be Blood, to explain why it's important that it's not just where the facility is sitting, but the entire surrounding area that's important. But I can't play that clip because of technical limitations that we have here. So I've asked Phil to reenact that for us.
Yes. Drainage! Drainage, Eli, you boy. Drain dry. I'm so sorry. Here. I have a milkshake. And you have a milkshake. And I have a straw. There it is. You see it? You're watching? And my straw reaches across the room and starts to drink your milkshake. I drink it up. That's what he's talking about, right?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. In other words, the facility itself is taking property that's underneath it that the Native Americans believe, to some degree, they have a say in how it's used because it's been part of their ceremonies for a long time. The entire wetlands use that. And when you take that hot water from underneath the wetlands, you're changing the temperature of the water in the wetlands. And so things that depend upon warmer water in hot springs and things like that to stay alive may not be able to use it for that purpose anymore. And so what needs to happen is I think they'll figure out a way to be able to make sure that this facility is safe and will continue to be used after the 240-day review is up.
But I think it's worthwhile to at least hit that pause button and make sure that they understand the potential impacts of this thing before going forward. I think it's reasonable.
And finally, Doobie. Oh, but one thing, Kaylee, that was amazing. All right, go ahead, Doobie.
Yeah, Kaylee, that was beautiful. Thank you very much. So I guess not many of you know this, right? But I am like, what is it, like almost 40% Indigenous American, and I happen to be having my ancestry at least, like Pasqua Yaqui tribe DNA. And they're very famous for licking toads, right? Which something my ancestors apparently love to do, still love to do today, right? So there, I understand like there could be like a spiritual connection, a traditional connection. But that being said, like fuck the toads, fuck the indigenous people, fuck their culture, fuck their dead religions. Who cares? Right? That's stupid. But I wonder. So on the topic of the geothermal plant, I think it's silly to halt an entire project like this for a tiny toad that only exists in this one place. It doesn't seem like it's relevant to the rest of the country, given that it only exists in this one place. So fuck the toad, like let it die. Who cares? That being said, though, I wonder how much, like, some of you guys said that you're like team people, right? And on the topic of like eminent domain broadly, or this kind of like a seizing of land and property, like broadly, like, I wondered what your positions would be on like something like the high-speed rail here in California, right? That went through neighborhoods, businesses, cultural landmarks, all gobbled up by this high-speed rail that was very unpopular and it ended up not fulfilling the promises that were made at the start of the project, and all gobbled up along the way for progress, for team people, right? What do you guys like think about that? Like, who, when you disagree, right? When there's disagreement amongst the team people, right, about what projects are necessary for the future or for progress or whatever the fuck, how can we say honestly that it's moral to take an action like that, to seize property, to seize land, to destroy a cultural landmark, and for progress or for humanity, quote unquote? Like, how do you know when you're correct about this?
So to answer that, right, we don't know, right? Like it's impossible, very improbable.
we know.
I would say, to predict the future with 100% accuracy, right? Like we simply cannot see all possibilities and we cannot account for all things. But we have a handy dandy tool that helps us make these decisions. And it's called democracy, right? Everyone gets a say, and everyone gets a. I understand you hate democracy, right? But this is what we have decided upon, and it works best, right? You guys hate the democracy, and I understand everyone here hates democracy.
Every single organization doesn't work via democracy. There are organizations that do have, one voice making a decision in all aspects of life, but saying we don't decide everything by 51%.
The answer is really fucking simple. Did they homestead the property? Do they have proof that they homesteaded the property? No? Well, then they don't own the property. Fuck off. I don't care. Did they build something that's lasting that we can tell that they homesteaded the property? Yes. Well, then we need to try and do our best to give the property to the original property owner. That's it. Like the high-speed rail situation, eminent domain, that's all theft.
Yeah.
It's theft done by a majority of people saying it's okay. But I mean, Wick, I don't know if you've like gone outside and talked to these people that vote, but they're fucking retarded.
Yo, I talk to you on panels and I let you vote, right? So if I let you vote, I can let them vote too.
Wait, but why are you okay with so why are you okay with a bunch of people, like a mob, all like getting together and saying, yeah, we're gonna jack your shit, we're gonna jack your land? Like, why is that?
Because
like,
it's not as simple as that. I am not okay with, for example, if I am dying, right? If I need heat because the winter is so cold and I am literally dying, for people to be like, no, I'm not going to let you do what you need to do to stay warm and survive. Like when it comes to
eminent domain.
What are you talking about?
Right? Eminent domain has a purpose, right? It has a purpose.
Usually that purpose is
to legalize theft, yes.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
Hold on.
I'm
No,
a
no,
farmer.
usually the purpose is
Motherfuck
highways.
eminent domain
Usually,
and whoever
yes.
fucking.
Yeah.
But we can use it in other instances.
Well,
as
and
well.
usually it's highways through minority neighborhoods. That's usually the purpose of eminent domain. If we're
Sure,
being
you
honest.
can use this tool
Or through
poorly
farmers'
and badly
fields.
and oppressively, but you can also use it well to serve society's needs.
No, but this is democracy, right? You're in a minority. You don't get a vote. Like there's fewer of you. You just lose the vote. So too bad. You get a highway through your neighborhood now. Like this
Obviously,
is clearly
we need
what happens.
checks and balances here, right?
Oh,
Obviously, we
no.
need checks and
Vote
balances.
harder, Daddy.
But look,
So
at
wait,
the end of the
what is
day,
that
no
about
balance.
on
You
democracy?
just get to see
what
what
is your
happens.
proposal for this? Scott's proposal is we just got to find who
Respect
the original
property
owner is,
rights?
whatever that the fuck
Respect
means.
property
right?
rights?
What
I
is
mean,
your
I don't know if you know this,
black
Wick. Have
what
you
is
ever heard of a man
your
by the name of
solution?
James J. Hill? He actually built the entire Great Northern Railroad without any sort of government grants or even the right of way. He actually just gave people a good deal that they agreed to along the way. I know, fucking crazy that the fucking government would be expected to fucking pay a standard market rate for fucking real estate. Holy shit, they can't just use legalized theft through fucking eminent domain, which is what they do, is they just use that to not have to pay the full real estate price.
So can we let's go to Lactoid because he was asked a question, and then we'll go to DB and Ico.
Could you please ask the question again, Link?
Sure. So, given that you are entirely against eminent domain, right? But we have a problem that is affecting people, right? We have an energy crisis, right? Looming upon us. We have a global climate crisis looming, and we have to make these decisions, right? As Doobie asked originally, when it comes to where we place these things, a decision has to be made. How would you go about it?
First of all,
wait, hold
Doobie,
on.
we have to be kind of cognizantly aware of he's betraying
Lactoid
his
needs to
froggy
answer.
amphibian kind.
Please.
So,
Well, Doobie's
That's
a
the
Quizlet.
question.
We got
I
that.
don't
We
know.
can-
I
like,
don't know.
Doobie
like,
doesn't
so-
care if all the other frogs croak.
Well,
I'm
okay,
gonna
but like,
go
so
for a while,
maybe
but go
I'm
on.
concerned. Maybe I'm missing like what eminent domain is, right? But like my understanding of like Doobie's question, like eminent domain is okay. There's a public this was super big in like urban renewal, right? Which and highways, highways the biggest one by far. This idea of, well, the government wants to build, they want to build something on your land. They want to build something. In fact, they want to build something on your house, and they're struck with a very inconvenient fact. That fact being that you happen to live there, and that troubles them greatly because they would much prefer to have their road go through your house. And so instead of coming to you in your house that you live in and say, okay, I'll give you some money in exchange for your house. How much is it going to cost you? And like actually like doing some kind of like market bartering system where it's like, you go to different neighbors, you go to different neighborhoods and you try to like get, a reasonable price about what's the cheapest way we can build this project or something along these lines. Instead, they're just like, no, we're going to build it here. Fuck you. And they will tear down entire sections of cities and they'll just put up highways. And sometimes they'll even tear down entire sections of cities because some major corporation wants to build like a research plant there. This was most evident with Pfizer, who was I forget the town, but Pfizer was given the green light by the city the city came in, tore down an entire neighborhood, and then Pfizer canceled their plans.
Look,
And
I
now
will
it's just
cop to the
garbage heap.
fact that a lot of times this is done in an abusive manner. I'll cop
It's
that.
done too often. It's done too often
100%.
in
I'll
an
give you
abusive
that.
manner.
But the question
in an
remains.
abusive manner
but
to
it's
even
that
like
10%
consider
of
using-
time.
But the question remains. We have a problem, and do we allow one person who decides, you know what, my house is here, and I know this is the really the best spot for this geothermal plant, but my house is here, gang, and I don't want to sell it at all. You're just gonna you just cannot have
Hold on.
this. Do we
First
just
come,
let
first
that
serve.
one person decide the fate for potentially hundreds of thousands of other people who need access to this power?
And
Right?
offer
Whose
them
lives
more
will be
money.
I have a
significantly
clarifying
worse.
question.
Offer them more money.
Yeah, so
It
we
doesn't
can-
matter.
I have a- I have a-
yeah,
stubborn
so
as hell.
I
If
understand,
you're
like,
saying
so
people
this is
don't
the
want to
quinti-
sell, then no, wait.
Right.
If that's the case, then James J. Hill's Great Northern Railroad would have never been built. Yet
Wait,
it was.
no,
So
hold on.
I'm sorry.
This is like the quintessential like the idea of the movie Up, right? The guy who just will not sell even though you're going to give him like a ridiculous amount of money. Not only does this hypothetical person only seems to exist for people trying to justify eminent domain, never actually in its implementation. If this person were to spring up, I would still be against it. I think that would be like a more interesting conversation if this person ever actually happened. but it just never happens that way. Most of the time, what it
Because
is
we have eminent domain and we don't let it happen.
Well, exactly, because you got a neighborhood who doesn't want to leave.
It's because you wait 20 years and then they die.
Okay.
And then
Uh,
the kids sell it,
so-
and then it happens
okay.
anyways. That's what
We got it, we got
always
it.
happens in
One
every
more
No,
major thing.
Lactoid, Doobie, Ico, Stabby.
One last thing, and it's an unrelated point. The panda crisis is due to the Chinese government artificially restricting the supply of pandas. You can look it up. They actually whenever they export it, they mandate that they not breed, or if they do breed, the babies belong to the government of China. So China is responsible for the pandas dying out. That's a fact. You can look that up.
That and pandas
Let's
don't
go
really-
to Doobie, Ico, and then Stabby.
Well, I'm just like, because I think it was a Lactoid who made the point about like minorities being screwed over by eminent domain. I wonder what Wick is somebody. I think you're like a lefty Wick, right? So you probably believe in like systemic racism and whatnot. You believe that like white people might have, like in general, might have some kind of in-group preference toward whites over like non-whites, right? So in a system like this, right, when you have a democracy, what check or balance would you put in place to keep that majority white group from fucking over the minority group again and again and again, which has happened historically?
Well, we have several mechanisms in place to kind of put a check on like totalitarianism democracy, right, for lack of a better term, right? We have the fact that the Senate exists, which is representative in nature to an extent that isn't one-to-one with the population. We also, and that's not the only thing we also have legislation that gets put in place, the Civil Rights Act. We have the Bill of Rights, right, which legislation should not be able to circumvent and things like that. And we do and should put more strictures in place so that these tools by the government are not abusive.
Specifically, like target black and brown people, like in the law to affect them mostly, right? Like it's not like they're saying, hey, we're going to build through black and brown neighborhoods specifically. No, it's just, hey, there's a neighborhood. Our group doesn't live in there, so fuck that group. We're using eminent domain to get rid of it.
Yeah, we should change the way we do that. But when it comes down to it, right? Like again, if we have one or a single family, right, that is holding up change that would benefit literally hundreds of thousands of people, at a certain point, we have to say you are not allowed to hold this hostage like that.
Yeah, so you would sacrifice the
Here's the proof.
livelihoods
Here you
and
go.
the homes
With
of
my
the
own
black and
shit.
brown people for progress, quote unquote.
Super quick. Wick is proving this quote correct. Democracy has nothing to do with freedom. Democracy is a soft variant of communism. He's proving it correct. When it comes down to it, if enough people tell you to go fuck yourself, then you have no freedom.
Well, no, I'm not saying, like,
I was
I
about to say,
explicitly, I'm not.
I believe in the
alignment with Wiki.
minority of the rights of one against the majority of everyone else. And so that's something I've always believed. Like, so I think if they truly don't want to sell, and the city isn't willing to offer them a price that they're willing to accept, then tough fucking shit. It's not your place to say what they get to do with their own property.
Okay, come on. We got it.
Very productive.
We gotta move on. We gotta move on. So you can respond. Then we gotta go to Ico and Stabby.
Just very briefly, like, look, I'm not just saying that if you get 51% of the vote, you can just take it shit all the time and whatever you want. But I'm saying there are edge cases where we do need the majority to have the final say. Not in every case. There are exceptions laid out in the Bill of Rights, I think, that are very important. Even if the majority wants to take your guns away, they should not be able to do it. Even if the majority wants to restrict your right to speak,
the majority should pay that.
An eminent domain isn't you get nothing. They pay above in many cases.
Get market rate
price if they
no, they do not. That is that is a bald-faced lie.
That's
okay.
Real quick.
The only reason you use the domain is to get out of using.
Okay, hey, we have to move on. Ico, Stabby.
Okay.
Afterwards.
So I just want to bring this back to the geothermal plant and the question here, because I'm not exactly sure who people are saying is the victim of eminent domain here. Because if the question is, as was proposed when eminent domain was being brought up, was who is the original owner of this, right? Well, let's ask ourselves, who is the original owner of those ceremonial hot springs whose water is being sucked up by that straw, right? Wouldn't it be the Native Americans who have the oldest claim on that water?
Not necessarily.
They have no claim to that water.
So
well, then
it
it doesn't.
Using something is not private property. Private property is established when you homestead property, right? You have to change the property in such a way that your labor cannot be undone from the property itself, and therefore taking the property would be stealing your labor. What you're talking about is common property.
So you're saying if they made
Common.
changes to a hot spring in order for it to then like become usable, like make it a
Yeah,
human
if they built like a if they
then
built some type of like let's say like we're talking about like Tenutacline, right? And they built this massive aqueduct structure city in this area. They own that property, right? Like there's no argument that they don't own that property
okay,
because they homesteaded that property.
and if you suck up all the hot water that fed those aqueducts or whatever structure it is they might have built, then because they own the aqueduct, but do they own the water that feeds into it?
I drank your milkshake.
No.
Yeah, so, right. So this is a question of who has access to what, right? So because I can imagine now,
I can actually explain it.
Oh, no. Let
so you
me
don't
finish.
own the water.
Let Aiko
You
get
don't
this
own
point
the
out.
water,
Let
but you have
Aiko get his
easy
point
space
out.
does.
Let Aiko get his point out. Then you can respond.
I can imagine now that you could start to get now battles over these things, right? So they need a certain amount of water in order to make this plant work. So if somebody else comes in and says, okay, now that it's a free for all, now that we know this is a limited resource and anyone who can take it, it's theirs just by virtue of them taking it. Can't someone else stick their straw in there and pull out all the hot water and then make the plant unworkable and that be legal?
You can
No,
respond,
so-
then
so-
stab
so-
me and Corey.
Yeah, so that's not how that works in terms of water rights, right? So let's say there's water feeding in. You build an irrigation system, right? You built that irrigation system with a downstream of water, and then someone upstream from you, let's say, builds a dam and limits your water. And you were getting energy from that water. It was your drinking water, etc. So what you have is you have some established common property. You have an easement to that water. So the individual that builds the dam that restricts the water towards the usage of the property that you've already homesteaded either has to give you some form of easement right, has to settle with you in some capacity, or has to provide you access to the water in some regard that maintains the original value of your property.
So if there was a development by this native tribe, now what you're saying is the owners of the plant have to at least make sure that those like springs remain viable. Those developed springs.
Right, like if you could find irrigation systems, right, and people were, but the problem is even if you found those irrigation systems, they would have long been abandoned. So you'd have like a claim to the property itself.
Well, I don't mean
but
irrigation.
You wouldn't have a claim to let's say the water or easement rights because you weren't using that easement.
It's not just the water per se, right?
That
It's hot water.
usually
It's the heat in the
states
water that's
make a
being
claim on
claimed.
groundwater. They claim to own it, so it would be the state of Nevada.
Let's go to
Yeah, but that's an illegitimate fucking theft of property to begin with.
first.
Yeah,
Aiko,
but I'm just arguing like a lawyer first.
Aiko, are you done? And then after that, we'll go to stabbing Corey.
The only other thing is I would like Lactoid to look up Kilo versus New London and maybe discuss that a little bit later on once he's like familiarized himself with the case.
Okay. Stabbing.
ILO.
Okay, so I wanted
texted
to
it
point
you.
out.
DM.
I wanted to point out that this is a closed system with geothermal plants, especially when you're dealing with sulfur-rich waters and especially hot waters. It goes back into the reservoir. So what the Native American tribes are asking for, that I'm seeing in the article, is they are asking for a sliver of the map that used to be theirs that has been pushed back a little bit more so that they can just extend some of the protection boundaries for the wetlands. The wetlands are not going to be harmed unless that sulfur buildup, the sodium buildup, like that can cause a plant accident, and that can be problematic and hurt the area around it. But that's immediately around the plant. Who fixes cars in here? Like I fix cars. It's a closed system. Bad things happen when the system is leaking or something to that extent. But this
Tractors
isn't
count.
even burning this stuff off. This is actually a closed system that returns the water back to the reservoir. So when you guys are saying eminent domain, unless you're talking about the burn off of the water that's coming out from under those wetlands, which by the way is going to be returned within it takes about 6 hours to cycle through that system. So it's going right back within 6 hours, and it's not pulling all of it at once. It's a constant, it's like it's a tributary. It's like a tributary stream, only now it's going through a plant. That's how geothermal plants even work. Like, do you guys know what geothermal plants are? Do you know that they're closed systems? Do you know that the water goes back to the reservoir? Jesus, eminent domain was just some wild fucking tangent. Literally nobody needed to have just now, just to like plug some fantasy of like the Union feds coming to get your lands for the railroad. Calm down. That is not how geothermal plants fucking work. Jesus motherfucking Christ.
Hey, Corey.
You guys are men. Aren't you
I'm
supposed
sure
to
they're
like
not.
this shit?
I'm sure they're not going to use
Christ.
no eminent domain. I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's the
No,
problem
Magma,
here.
by the way, really
the
quickly,
problem
no,
here is that it
no.
changes.
Magma Energy Corps owns this land, and the land surrounding it is either tribal lands or it's already a preserved land or something to that extent. So just so you're aware, the only lands that the plant is going to be on or any access roads, Magma Energy Corp already owns and paid fair price for. So just so you guys are aware, I'm not a capitalist shill or anything. They do own this land. There is nobody taking shit. Okay, calm the fuck down.
Yeah, but Stabby,
Then
I think
what are we
So
worried
you're
about?
talking about
the issue is that-
changing the
Oh,
you're
God.
talking about changing the nature of the value of the property, including the damage that could be done from the heating, right? So
NIMBY
I don't
bullshit.
understand how eminent domain was a tangent. I'm confused as to how your argument is against what we were saying. We were using other examples to describe the process.
Well, because in
right?
the topic, right, one of the
Mhm.
secondary questions was what about
There's-
other projects that interfere with human life, right? So
Right.
yeah, this
Right.
is what
We
this
can
is why
we can
eminent
deal with other
domain
projects later.
is,
The
is not only not
prompt-
a tangent, but it's actually like the spirit of what the fuck we're talking about, and it's not a
Right.
fantasy
This
that
is
people have
already
their
owned.
land taken for free.
So there's nothing inside of
that
your
definitely
hypothetical
happens.
with
You
this
can
one
Google
that
it
goes
right
against
now
what you would
and see
say.
how it happened all over California with a fucking
It's
high-speed rail.
ridiculous.
So to say that that's a fantasy just tells me you're either not following the conversation or you're looking for ways to get jabs in that are totally irrelevant.
No. I want you to read the prompt again, since you're obviously
for
struggling,
it.
Doobie. For all frog kind.
No, you read the prompt. Tell
You want me to
me
read it
where
for
in the
you?
prompt it does not.
Wonderful.
Tell me where in
Okay.
the prompt, right? You found
So here we
somehow
go.
that the imminent domain will be
Here we
like
go.
a tangent.
Oh,
Because I'm looking at it right now,
Um,
and it asks
now,
about other
in
projects that
Nevada,
interfere with
a
human life.
proposed
I'm sorry, human life.
geothermal power plant has been put on hold
my
due to the
goodness.
endangered frog being near its construction site. Conservationists have argued that while green energy is essential, it can't come at the price of extinction. Do you think important construction projects should have to consider their impact to wildlife? Does it matter what type of wildlife or where the construction is? What about projects that interfere with human life, such as Native American sacred practices? Or is progress more important than any of those considerations?
Let's
When
go
we're
back a little
talking
bit.
about our geothermal plant, we are talking about
We're not
how
just
this is
talking about the
already-
geothermal plant.
Are you gonna gish gallop against your own cell phone?
Yeah,
Like,
we're not
yeah,
talking
yeah,
just
wait,
about
wait,
the
let's-
geothermal plant.
I
This
want
is
to
why
I want to
in my
reread
opening,
a
I
part of
pointed
that.
to other projects that interfere with human life, which is why we're talking about imminent
and they're
domain.
supposed to work
Again,
this
you're not
way,
following the
exactly like
fucking
you're working
conversation.
right now.
Because that's
No.
the kind of justifications that's used to build things like highways.
Does
And
that interfere with
it's
human
all
life?
connected. That's not even 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon separation. That's like 3.
It's in the prompt.
It's literally in the
I'm
prompt.
banning you from that
So-
level of
so
discussion
listen
for
to me.
the rest of the panel.
All
That's
of the
ridiculous.
solutions, with the exception of this sliver of land, which the article actually posits that one. It's talking about a sliver of land that it's going to go like this to cover some of the wetland at the base of a foothill. And it's saying that
Okay, but the topic is about much more
they've
than
already
just
worked
this
on this.
plant.
Right, but this is working exactly the way we want this to work. Correct? Yes or no? The
No.
corporation paid fair price. That it was already part of the like it was okay with the people who were selling the land, etc.
Well,
This
no,
is
because
already working.
some people
Maybe
on this
just
panel
like,
earlier,
no.
and maybe
Oh, I
not
love
following,
this.
said, "Hey,
Don't know what the
frog,
objection is, but
the
it'll be
rights,
funny.
quote unquote, or the livelihoods of the frogs shouldn't be considered at all." Right? Because
Toads,
this-
Doobie.
Not
Toads.
just
whatever.
their lives, but their livelihoods
Okay,
as
so
well.
wait, hold on. So
They
they're not
deserve
even
jobs.
frogs; they're toads. Fuck those toads. Okay?
Oh,
Because some of these people
Amphibianists.
here,
First
some
of
of these people
I,
here
Doobie,
said,
I
"Hey,
can say
hey,
at this
they
particular moment in
should not
time,
be
I
considered at
definitely
all. This
fuck
is not
all frog
working the
kind.
way everybody wants them to, given that they are pausing the construction to consider the stupid toad."
Okay,
Okay.
let's go to Corey.
Well, if I remember correctly, a toad is a type of frog. If I remember, I could be mistaken.
No, they can't even breed.
I could be wrong.
I
Of
just
course-
Googled it.
Of course,
I
I
don't
told.
I like how he
What
admits
happened?
he's just like, I just Googled it,
It's
dog.
not
I
the
don't
same
know
thing.
toad breeding habits. I
You don't
could be
even
real
have to
with you,
retain
gang. I
information
don't
anymore.
know. I don't know how this happens, right? Like, maybe like I know about the birds and the bees, but not the
Well, when,
frogs and
when
the
a
toads.
mommy
I don't
toad
know
and
about
a
that.
daddy
It-
toad.
the way to think about it is like this, right? So Americans would be frogs, Canadians would be toads, right? It's an entirely different breed.
I can
We
breed
don't
with
like-
Canadians.
We
though.
do have psychedelics on our backs for sure.
I know
yeah,
that.
but
for a
you,
fact.
yeah, but you shouldn't, right?
And actually, if you want to
But
lick
that's
my
a
back,
different
you're
question.
more
That's
than
a
welcome
different
to.
argument, right?
Straight
Like,
to racism.
but-
Straight to racism.
but that wasn't the point that I was.
Canadian is a
attempting to make.
race now?
I'm not going to touch that. But to bring it back, I'm going to bring it back to eminent domain. Okay, since I think there's something at least to me interesting there. So lactoid. So I'll take your word for it, but I think you mentioned that eminent domain is majority used for like building roads.
Yeah, specifically through like minority neighborhoods. So
Yeah.
there was the Kilo case that I was asked to take a look at by ICO. We didn't cover this, and I've just looked through it, right? And this is interesting because the against the eminent domain was the Libertarian Institute for Justice and the NAACP, the AARP, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference all came together in this like alliance and try to shut down the eminent domain because there was multiple amicus briefs filed that showed, yeah, this is most of the time used against underpowered communities, so minorities, the elderly.
So yeah, if that's, and I'll gladly take your word for it. I trust you. Where it's like your position, Wick. So it seems like if in fact eminent domain is like used to build roads, it seems like it just allows the government to implement like piss poor solutions. The U.S. really doesn't need like more roads. That's not the type of infrastructure we need to be going in.
So just because in the past it's been primarily used for that purpose does not
and
mean
still
it's the
today,
only
from what
purpose
I
to
could
be
be wrong,
used
but
for,
still
right?
today,
like it has more utility outside of its major how it has been used, right? Is primarily for
that's
these
still my
roads
broader
and
point.
Yes,
transportation,
you can
right?
technically use a knife
point.
as a
Finish my point.
screwdriver,
You
but what
can
it's
use it.
usually
If I
used
may
for is
finish my
like
point,
stabby
if
and
I
cutty
may
stuff.
finish my point, KOE, please. My principle of like it still seems to allow the government to implement piss poor solutions, as in like you shouldn't have to violate the you shouldn't have to violate the property rights or like seize someone else's property. Like if you can't come up with a creative solution that doesn't. It's like, unless you could think of some sort of like scenario where someone really needs to be just like pretty much like thrown out of the house or out of the property. I can't, like, it just might just be my lack of creativity. I can't think of any sort of situation where that has to be a case. Like I think the government or the institution should be able to implement a creative solution. Same thing with here of like I'll even use it for the application of preservation of this toad. If you can come up with a solution, like then it's probably like not the direction to go in. Like I think it forces you to be creative. Like if you can't come up with a solution that doesn't violate the rights of others, then you just lack creativity.
So,
and
Corey Campbell on his fucking libertarian arc. Let's go.
I'll address two things, if I may. The larger point, right? And then the specific instance is we're talking about when it comes to the toads or the frogs, whatever. Fuck, right? So to the larger point as a whole, right? Like, I don't think it's a piss poor solution. I think it's been done piss poor in the past, but I think that it's a tool that we shouldn't just discard. And this talk about like, oh, they don't pay fair market price. Like they're required by law to pay you just compensation for whatever land or property that they take from you.
The
This
judge
is in the law.
decides what's
This is
just
built
compensation.
into these
No, the
things.
government does.
Yeah,
the law that the government also enforces and has a monopoly.
I was gonna say,
Their assessors.
hang on, guys. I'm a farmer, and back in the 90s, eminent domain was actually used on one of my fields for building, guess what? A fucking highway. And they did not pay us fair market value, and we were told, take it or fucking else, and we'll give you nothing. And then, here's the second one. For about 6 weeks, one of our fields was right in the crosshairs of the Keystone XL pipeline. And then the fucking path changed a lot, its precise location. But for about 6 weeks, we were looking down the barrel of eminent domain ourselves. And trust me, when you are in the fucking path of that shit, it isn't some blessing that's being bestowed upon you that you should just be so happy about. Like, no, they're fucking shitting all over your property rights because they want to. And that's it. That's
what
it.
is your what is your solution?
Pay a fair
right?
fucking market price.
Money?
They weren't gonna pay us. They sure as shit weren't gonna pay us what we wanted.
So here's my solution. My solution is that we deregulate nuclear and we won't have to worry about these geothermal issues.
Yo, I'm great for nuclear, right? Like I'm a big proponent of nuclear.
Greenest
we
of
need more
energies.
nuclear in the United States. We need to be building more plants right now today. I'm with you on that. Like to address a specific point though, when it comes to these toads, right? Like so as I understand it, there is like they are trying to figure out whether or not it will impact the toads in a very negative way, right? They do not yet know. Again, from my
So here's the
reading
problem with
of
that.
the argument.
Here's
Like, so
there's
they
a couple
don't know
problems with that.
yet. So whether or not it's going to be a poor solution, what they're doing now, we don't know yet, right?
Right.
Like we
So
haven't figured that out.
and that's true, right? Like, so like not even gonna go like full libertarian fucking, siren song here. Just looking at like what we're talking about. When you have a court stop you in January, and then another court open you back up in February, and then another court stop you in April, and then you're gonna sit and you're gonna halt construction longer while some government agency does some fucking investigation to see whether or not you may or may not be allowed to build this project you've invested millions in, or whether or not it's just going to slow you down. What you're talking about is money, right? Like you're talking about massive amounts of money that not only occur to this specific company, but occur to every single company, every single town, every single property owner when they're determining whether or not they want to build geothermal or build hydroelectric, right? Or build something that has some connection to the environment outside of the property, right? Nuclear, on the other hand, like you're not going to have any issues because there's no danger to any species by building nuclear other than at the exact site that you build it. And then you could just move it, right? Like there's no issue there other than massive government regulation. So what you're talking about is you're severely increasing the cost for this specific instance, but also the calculation for insurance and companies that want to do this in the future. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're dampening the growth of geothermal across the entirety of the United States. You're not just talking about this one place. What you're talking about is decreasing investment in true green energy technology. And that if you're really concerned about the environment, right, then you should talk about that. And we're doing so for a toad that only exists in this one area, right? And there's no evidence to suggest that this toad fills like a unique niche in the environment that no other species can take, right? So like if this toad dies, right, then you have convergent evolution, and like other species are able to adapt and fill.
That's why it's a temporary hold.
No. Other species are able to fill that role just as easily, and there's no danger here of biological collapse or biodiversity collapse, like causing this major issue to the marsh.
That's literally why it's on a temporary list.
Oh, Wick, if I may ask, because like, yeah, so you mentioned in my example, like just because it was used badly in the past doesn't mean it can't. But like, so like, are you able to come up with a situation where like eminent domain would be like it would be justified?
Sure, I gave you an example. I would feel justified, but they said, "Oh, this never happens," right? That was the thing. Like, where there is an individual who owns a piece of property and they need to build. They need this piece of property to build like a nuclear plant or geothermal or some other thing that's going to benefit the town or the city or the state to such an extent where it's going to improve the quality of life for hundreds of thousands of people. Do we let one person or one family or one small group hold that hostage? And I think that in certain cases, absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. Does that mean we just take it without any compensation? No. Obviously, we need to give just compensation. And if we need to up the price on that, very fair enough, right? We can. That's a technical issue, right, rather than a conceptual issue. And I think that there's an argument that can be made there. But I think that this is a tool that we need to keep people from individuals or small groups from being able to hold progress hostage because, insert reason here.
The problem is that you justify the norm.
Reason
If I
here
may
is
just
profiting those businesses out of actually paying the cost of business.
I just want to
That's
clarify.
all you're doing. It's a get out of jail free card. It's a discount card.
So can I, so as in like, so this specific story, Wick, like if it was not a toad, it was like just like a family in a house, you would feel justified. I think it's justified to like, well, pretty much like seize their property in that instance.
Pay them for their property, right? To relocate them, have the government relocate them to a place where they can, of their choosing, right? I think that's fine.
What if I won't move?
But if it's paid, yeah, exactly. In terms of like, what if you, as in like, I would say
I'm armed.
I would say like just payment is like whatever with the lack of eminent domain, whatever monetary dollar value that lures them out of their property is like, that's how you get them out. As in, like, you don't need the law. There should be whatever money that it takes to get them out. Like that's what you should be paying. Like the law allows them to pretty much, at least it seems like, I could be wrong, but it seems like the law allows them to more or less like get away with probably like either pretty much underpaying them, probably most likely.
Yeah, the problem is that you're justifying a moral norm, right? Like this is the issue, is when you say that it's okay in any instant for the state to take away people's private property and force them out via some amount of money, and if they refuse to accept that money, you have to force them out because the state has determined that it's for the betterment of a larger majority of people, right? Then you start going, well, that's just a numbers game. That's just this. Like, we can figure this out with democracy. But the problem is that you've already justified the norm that the state can destroy, that you don't have private property rights and that those don't exist and that the state can violate them so long as a majority of people have a belief that it benefits them. That's the issue.
Like rights aren't like we have just a fundamental disagreement here where rights aren't absolute, right? That there are corner cases or exceptions to every rule, right? And
name a right that's not absolute.
The right to private property.
Okay, name an instance where it's not an absolute right. When is your private property no longer an absolute right?
When you use that private property to harm others.
Divorce. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, well then that's not private property rights.
Yes,
now
it is. It's absolutely still your private property.
You're
just using it for
somebody
bad
else's
cause.
private
Well, he said if you're sitting like on a geothermal site or whatever.
Guys and gals and toad frog pals, what you
rights aren't absolute
rights,
when you violate other people's rights.
Rights are just the necessary conditions of one's proper existence. Nothing more, nothing less.
Did you just okay that? Like, oh my God.
Did you guys know that one of the biggest times and one of the most expensive times the federal government used eminent domain was because of an underground fire in Centralia, Pennsylvania, so that they could actually get everybody off of that property and get them rehomed? Did you guys know that's like the most expensive eminent domain case in the United States?
Wait, why did they force
No.
people off their homes?
No, I didn't know that.
No,
There was an underground fire.
There was an underground coal fire that's burning to
And
this
it was
day. It's
going
going to
to
be burning
kill
for
them.
another 450 years, roughly. And it was killing people. And they purchased all
Beautiful
people couldn't
coal.
leave. They were too poor to leave, and they couldn't go into the mines because the mines were on fire. So Centralia, Pennsylvania is still on fire, and the most expensive eminent domain case in American history was getting everybody from Centralia, Pennsylvania moved out and resettled in other areas of Pennsylvania or even in other states. So
Could
just so
they
you guys
stay
know
if
that.
they wanted to? I think that's more important.
Nobody wanted to stay. I don't know. Probably. I have no idea. But all I know is that people were dying left and right. And
Is
so
that really eminent domain though?
If the mechanism used,
they used it.
No,
Yes,
right,
the
like
mechanism used, it's what they legally used to make sure that these people were not homeless
called?
vagabond trains through America. Centralia, Pennsylvania.
yeah, I mean, like this seems like
So-
this seems like not really in the spirit of eminent domain though, right? Like
Sure.
this
Well, if
sounds
you
like a
believe that
government
all eminent
bailout.
domain is bad, then yes, you would agree that
Seems
it's
like this
Well,
seems
Well,
but
this
not
is
in the spirit.
disaster
Shush,
response.
shush. Let smarter people talk.
Yeah, I
What-
am.
what
That's
this
why we're
sounds
cutting
like
you
is-
off and letting me
is-
and Stabby have a conversation.
Okay,
about
go
that.
ahead. Go ahead.
Dog. The combined IQ of the two of you like can't meet anybody. on
Worse,
this-
yours. Fucking, we're
Says
talking
the
like
Relax.
orders of fucking
Libertarian
magnitude.
boy.
We're talking about
Relax.
the difference between a fucking
You
sun
need to go get
to a
more
fucking
lotion on
sun
your
lamp.
Okay.
IQ
So when we're
numbers
talking
is
about-
the
we're
weirdest
talking
dick
about.
measuring contest
Can't
there's
even
ever been.
respond to my
Let's go.
fucking wit in
Let's
real
go.
time. You
God.
have to Google. What does a libertarian think? Let's Google. do
Okay,
my
let's-
fucking thing in front
let's
of me.
let
go on to
let
Twitter
him
and see
let
what
him
other
let Scott
top leaders
Scott
think what I have
get
to say.
get it
Nothing
out.
certain,
So what
you
I
don't
was saying-
care what the libertarians think. You're
hey,
eminent domain.
knock
They're
it
taking
off.
away from them.
Knock it off, Scott.
So-
Go ahead.
So it is an
It's just been
interesting
2
case.
weeks, so I've missed this.
It's an interesting case, but nevertheless, it's not really in the spirit of what eminent domain is, because you didn't need to use eminent domain in this case. You just as easily could have used any other form of government bailout to help these people move. These are individuals that wanted to move, right? And the government is, at least this is the way you're describing it. If I'm wrong here, then please correct me. But in the way that you're describing the case, these are individuals that wanted to move. And the government simply utilized this as a means of creating a government bailout so that the people had the funds to move.
Another piss poor solution when another probably better, more creative solution could have been implemented.
Well, hold up. So
Yeah, just
There's-
insurance.
Wait. On this specific event, there's two things that happened. In 1984, they offered the buyout, which most residents accepted because they didn't want to live there. There were a few families that wanted to stay despite the risk. They were like, no, I want to stay. In 1992, they did invoke eminent domain, and the people living there legally challenged it because they didn't want to leave, but they lost the challenge and were forced from their homes. We're not in favor of that. That's kind of fucked up. They didn't want to leave.
If the
Stabby,
ground
you
underneath
just
them is on
Googled
fire,
this
yes,
and
we
you
are.
didn't know that?
No, I
Hey.
just know about Centralia, Pennsylvania. It's also
okay,
from
of
a
course.
book I read, and it's from I know somebody who used to live over there, and then there's also a movie about it, and it's fucking no, it's not a movie, it's a video game. So I
Life
just
is
got
short.
interested in
I
that
guess
story
you
a
get to
long time ago.
gamble with
like
your
the
chips
book
how you
Silent
like.
Hill too. Like, isn't Silent like
I
wasn't it a Silent Hill
I
game?
think that's based
Fun,
off of a
kind
game.
of
Yeah.
And by the
Okay,
way,
yeah.
they
No, I
actually
just
came
got
to,
really
they actually
interested in
came
the
to a
story
final
years ago.
agreement. They actually finally came to a final agreement where the old people there, they would let them live out the remainder of their lives there. That was a political agreement. So it's not all horrible at the end of the day. But no, if you want to stay there in a dangerous place, that's people live in
Yeah, it's your
dangerous
right.
places all the time. People live in Florida. People live in Chicago. Talk about
Right.
dangerous places.
Yeah, but there are levels to this. A place where the underground is
Cellular Hills,
literally on
Florida.
fire is a little more dangerous.
It would
than
take over
Chicago.
250 years for that to actually like kill everybody
Pe-
there.
Again,
I mean,
people were
Chicago. I
dying
mean, how
from
many
being
murders every weekend?
poisoned.
It's
Like,
going
ground was
deeper. The fire's
poisoned.
going deeper. Yeah, it's not coming up or causing forest fires. It's
Yes.
going deeper.
So let's go to
Ico
Ico.
knows it's like all that precious coal.
Yeah, listen, there was
No.
That's pretty good.
yeah, we should
I'll
put a
give you that.
plant like underground with that coal so we can utilize it as it's burning at least, you know.
Yes.
But listen, I heard someone say earlier that there's never that example of the person who like won't leave or whatever. But I think we just heard some examples of it, and also like there are just some that come to mind just because they popped up in the news over the past that just come to my mind. One of them was that widow that got eminent domained by Trump in New York that got brought up in the 2016 debates when he was defending the idea of eminent domain just more generally at those debates. I remember that. I remember the border wall, which there were people who didn't want to give up their property as the wall was being built at the U.S. like Mexico border, whatever area that was. In fact, I seem to remember even people floating the idea of like buying up a lot of that land so that the wall couldn't get built in those areas. But none of those plans would have worked because of eminent domain. There's the Keystone Pipeline thing, which Phil talked about, but it's not just Phil. It was like a lot of people along those areas who didn't want to give up their land. There was really no question about the Keystone being stopped as a result of private property owners not wanting to give up for it, because when it comes right down to it, we all know there's people who won't sell their land in certain situations. There's another one right here in Texas. They're trying to build a high-speed rail, and eminent domain is really the only way that thing's getting built. And there are plenty of people between Dallas and Houston who don't want to give up their land, even though they made all of these they made it so that if it goes over your land and you don't want it to be there, it'll go above land so that like your cattle can still walk underneath it and stuff like that. But those are all situations that got resolved by eminent domain. I really don't know how the U.S. highway system ever could have gotten built without eminent domain. I think the only person here who can oppose eminent domain and have it like be philosophically consistent is Fabian, because he doesn't care about what any of the consequences are. So he can be consistent with that. But anybody else who actually like believes that the country needs to be built up and that certain levels of infrastructure need to happen in order for us to like have economic success in this country, like I don't see how you can square that with an absolutist view on eminent domain.
It's just easy. You
I would
just
just like
don't
to
want
point
to
out
pay
that
to play.
getting-
You don't want to pay for the
getting-
pleasure of what you want to get done. That's it.
Getting
That's
rid of
it.
the
That's
state out
long
of
and
this
short of it.
interaction.
That
would
is
build
all.
this
That
country
is
up.
all. That is all.
Ico,
You
would
don't
you-
want to pay the
like-
price that you would have
like-
to
like
otherwise
all of
pay to
that-
get people to agree with you. That's it. That's the long and
Like,
short of it. That's the
There's
discussion.
there's no reason for the government to be involved in highway construction at all. Like it would be more efficient if the market did it anyways.
Right, but you're talking about the
I
market
think you're
like
muted, Prime. I
Yeah,
think.
Prime, you're muted.
Sorry,
I think you're talking about
let's
the
not
market
gonna-
going 5 feet and then going in an opposite direction because somebody wouldn't want to sell, and then going again. Sort of like, what is it? The North Walking Faucet and the South Walking Faucet. Remember that tale where they're just like the two people that are walking in opposite directions
this
and
is
they
what
won't
happens.
stop, and they have to build highways around them and things like that.
This is what happens when idiots plan out a fucking highway without first having the fucking land to do it and without having the plans to do it. Like, if you can't build a sensible plan for a highway and its particular path because some people don't want to sell, then you build the highway in a different path.
Okay, so
I
I'm
go,
going to go to
should it be
Lactoid,
harder?
but I also want to hear what Doobie has to say about this because I imagine you might have a different take, but Lactoid.
Yeah, I guess to Ico and to really the people who are in favor of eminent domain, I think the anti-eminent domain case has been put forward. I echo a lot of it. But if we have to maybe, and this is maybe where I lose Scott, if we had to like come to some kind of like compromise, would you guys be okay with, like, let's say we quadrupled, like, instead of like the fair market price, it's actually like 4 times the fair market price you gotta pay, and the money only comes from the people who voted yes in the referendum required to actually take that property, and then they all have to pay it, and the people who voted no don't have to pay it.
To answer your question here, Lactoid, there has to be an upper limit of some sort of. Like, it can't be just whatever the person wants, right? Because some people are super unreasonable. They're like, "Yeah, you want my 1 acre of land? You got to pay me $20 million." Ha ha ha. You know what I mean? So there has to be some kind of upper limit in value,
Sure.
right? And I'm open to increasing this, right? To increasing the amount paid from what is considered just compensation, because there's a calculation, right? I haven't looked into it too deeply, right? Because this is a Twitch panel, but there is a calculation that assessors are required to use, right? And so if we need to adjust the mathematics of that, fair enough, right? Like, I'm for like upping the ante here. That's
I
okay.
guess more specifically, like, would you be okay with like making it a very high financial burden of like 4 or 5 times what the actual market value is? We still force you to sell it, but at 5 times the market value, and the money to pay for it only comes from the people who voted yes in the required referendum in order to actually
So
get
I
this
would
done.
I would have questions on the details of that, how you implement that, but in concept, sure.
Sure.
Wait,
There's
Lactoid,
no such.
can
There's
only the people who
the
voted
market
yes
doesn't.
ride the rail?
No, because the idea is like you're seizing someone's property, you're trying to justify that, and so if you're going to like make the affirmative decision to do this thing that I think is pretty clearly like morally wrong to like some like pretty strong extent, and we want to limit this to as much as possible. Like, I think it makes sense to be like, okay, like if it's really that critical enough, then enough people would be willing to like bear that cost to vote yes. If it was actually that critical enough.
I wanna-
If it wasn't.
How about this other limitation, which is the reason I brought up Kilo was because it took the right of eminent domain, which is already an established right, but then gave it to private corporations who could then use the state's power of eminent domain, like, to seize land. And that had
Boy,
that
have
really
they used it.
there was no like precedent for that until Kilo, and now it's like fundamentally a different game. So could we like go back to the earlier thing, which is like it's got to be something that it's got to be like public, and it can't just be like something that can be hijacked by the private sector.
Well, like I was just thinking to kind of Wick's point, and also now to your point a bit, Wick. It's like, God forbid, heaven forbid, Lord save us from an individual ever having a slight upper hand on their local government. My God, I'm sure that's what the founders had in mind when they started this country. Like, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sometimes,
But
if somebody's property is in the way of it, pay them.
yeah,
Okay,
but so what is
sorry,
the issue?
hold on. I do want to see if Doobie has a different take on this. Maybe you don't. But Doobie, since you started off saying, screw our Native American brothers and sisters, in less so kind words, in terms of this geothermal plant, do you think that when it comes to critical infrastructure, and I think a highway could be critical infrastructure, might not be, but it could be, right? And our highway system certainly is critical infrastructure. Do you think that it makes sense to necessarily pay like way above fair market price for that land, where it would make the cost balloon so high that it would be unfeasible? Do you think like the government should be concerned about literally everyone along the way to such an extent that it could conceivably have a budget that becomes unpayable? What do you think, Dibby?
So I think that the kind of individualism or a focus on the individual that you guys are, well, not you guys, some of you guys are promoting is kind of it's like a sickness. It's like a disease in the culture of our nation. So just as I said, fuck the frogs and fuck the indigenous people, fuck this 7-Eleven owner, right? That has his shop on the path of the high-speed rail system in California. Fuck Phil, right, for having his farm where they want to put a rail, or the Keystone Pipeline, which would have brought fuel to millions of people.
Spoken
Right?
like somebody that
So-
breeds as tadpoles.
Oh God!
Of course, you have so many children, you don't
Let-
care about
let
them
him
in
go,
at all.
Doobie.
I almost said something terrible. I love you, Phil. I'm sorry. I think that we're so if you were to think of the nation as a body, right? We're not alone in the body. Right? There are other people in the body with us. We're a little bit schizophrenic, right? So we need to understand this. So we're not just atomized people wandering around by ourselves. We need to interact with other people, and those people are going to have interests that conflict with ours. So we need to look to a governing body, like a government, say, hey, how do we decide what to do when our goals conflict with each other? I think democracy is an imperfect system, but it's probably the best one we have right now. So I'd agree with Wick, right? Democracy is probably the best way to handle this. And if there's somebody on the path that says, hey, this house was in my family for 1,000 generations, I don't want to sell the house even for 5 times the price of the project or whatever, or the cost of it, or whatever the fuck, or I'll only sell it for 5 times the cost. You say, hey, sorry, this isn't worth sacrificing the project overall and all the good it's going to do for everybody else in the country. So sorry, we're going to give you fair market value, not a cent above it. You need to live with that, right? You need to move the fuck on, because your fee-fees about this issue, about you losing your home or your farmland or whatever the fuck, is just, it's insignificant to the wider goal, the wider project of moving the country forward. So yeah, I think that's the best way to think about it.
I would.
Yeah. So real quick, fair market value doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a fair market value, because value is subjective to the private property owner, right? The value of my house could be very low. I could be ready to get rid of it, or the value of my house could be very high because, like Doobie pointed out, my great grandfather built it with his hands, and there's history here, and there's 3 generations of little markings, in the cupboard that show how tall everyone was at a certain time. Value is subjective to the individual that owns it. And what you're talking about is introducing conflict, and introducing private property violations, and introducing violations of people's rights. There's no amount of money times what, the market average is that can adequately meet some people's standards. Some people will say that this property is infinitely valuable to them. And they may actually believe that. They may actually fight for that. The problem here is that, what you have is you have the subjective value of other individuals that want a project built versus the subjective value of the individuals that have property that is, required for said project. And if they can voluntarily come to an agreement on price, that's the value of the property. That is what the value of the property is. If it's 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, and if no value can be determined because the landowner, right, that the big company is coming in trying to buy it, or the government's coming in to try and buy it, is, the project is a $200 million project and they won't take $200 million, that's the value of the project. And therefore the project isn't going to get built unless it finds another way. And that other way that you guys are referencing is establishing a moral norm that justifies the state in violating people's private property rights for the presumed subjective and or democratically determined value of other people. And once you establish that as a norm, then that is why I said that democracy is a soft variant of communism, because you've already determined that people's individual liberties and rights do not matter so long as a larger body determines that it's okay based off of their assessments to go against your
This is such a
your rights.
simplistic take that is ignoring mounds of context
Well, I mean,
when it comes to
not
how we deal
really.
with rights.
Not
and how
really.
we
I mean,
deal
what
with-
Doobie's
how we deal
rant
with
there.
value, how we deal with interactions with communities. Like this is
Well, don't just say it's
child
simple.
level
Say why
thing.
it's wrong.
I'm
No, I mean,
explaining to you
it's
right now
not.
if you'd listen, right?
No, you're not. You're
So
just engaged in ad hom.
obviously, right? Value at its core is whatever price people are willing to pay, right? That's your value. It's not how much you're willing to sell it for, it's how much people are
That's
willing
price.
to pay.
That's not
right?
what
So
value
that's
is. That's what
price.
price is.
mechanism.
But when it comes down
Wick.
to it, we have tools like, and to Lactoid, to your hypothetical, right? Like, so one of the problems that someone very wise in my chat pointed out, and I'll give credit where credit's due, Rabid Wombat pointed this out, is what is to stop in those cases government officials getting their buddies to buy that land up in advance and then sell it to the government, right, for 4 or 5,000, or not 4 or 5,000, 4 to 5 times the value, right? You can see how this scam would work. The government officials would know in advance what projects were coming in, so they would have their family members buy that land, refuse to sell, eminent domain would come in, get them 5 times the value of what they paid, boom, bam, bam. They got a lot of money right there. It's an easy scam, right? So
Who
there
needs
are
that
other
when you
things that are
have just
factors
eminent
that are in
domain to
play.
take it?
Well,
I mean, you
again,
have
But
to
no,
like
no.
find some way to
Give me
criminalize
just
it,
one
I
moment
guess.
here, because like what Doobie was saying a little earlier, and this also ties into what you're saying, also, Wick, folks. And folks, I want you to keep this in mind. Don't ever let people use the verbal bludgeons of things like society on you to get you to acquiesce to things. Because what Doobie said here and what Wick said also demonstrates society is no one in particular and everyone specifically except you. You'll notice that that's the society that's always used, because it's never your personal interests that never need to be considered. It's always this grander society. So keep in mind, when people say society, what they are meaning is no one in particular and everyone specifically
But
except you.
Phil, that's not true, right? So we could
But
recognize
it is.
you have personal interests, right? Which is why we're offering
Yes.
you'd be offered money for the land at all, right? This because we're recognizing they have a personal interest. We're
Not
saying
what
you,
I wanted to sell for it.
that your family,
Not what anybody else would have
you,
bought
your
it for.
family,
Let him
your
finish, Doobie.
ancestors that passed down this land are cogs in the machine that make up the nation, right? So you're not that important to the whole, right? So if we need to sacrifice
My
the
interests
cog
are quite
to
important to me.
benefit
So if you want me to
to
go
you, sure,
otherwise, pay me for
I
them.
understand that it's important to you, right? I get it, right? But your fees about this are far less important overall, right? If it's going to benefit the nation, yeah, we're going to have to sacrifice your fees. We're going to take your farmland. We're going to fuck up your family
And
lineage.
who is to
Do
decide
anything we
what
need to.
benefit is great? Whose good is greater, folks? That
Unfortunately,
is
the best thing
terrifying.
we have right now
That is a
is the
truly
democracy.
terrifying world where someone can decide
not that
whose greater
scary.
good is the greater one, folks.
This world,
What's even
this
more
world,
fucking
terrifying
buy
is when
his
you
kind
get
of
to
fucking
decide for
conformity,
everyone else.
okay?
Hold on, but Phil, this
I will
this
decide
very-
for
Called
me.
government and
this
eminent
terrifying
domain.
Phil, this terrifying democracy that you're talking about is the one that allows you
No,
to
that's
have
not democracy. What you're talking about
is the one that
dictatorship.
allows you
You are
it's the one that
telling
allows
people
you to have your
how it's
farmland in the
gonna
first
fucking
place.
be.
Is the one that allows you to have your farmland in the first place. So that dictatorship that you're talking about is telling other people that
Nonsense.
you can't just take Phil's farmland because you're in his neighbor and you want it. Right. So this it's not that scary, Phil. You still have a fucking farm right now.
That's
So
like
you're
that's like
being
saying a mobster. That's like saying a mobster in a neighborhood comes in and robs you for protection money, and then you're saying that the person has a
still got a
restaurant
store.
because of the mob. Like that's the mob that allows you to have a restaurant. All right, they're the ones protecting you from
It's not-
somebody that would come
it's
in.
not
Like
robbery.
no, you
To
don't
your
get a
argument,
fucking
Doobie.
choice.
Sorry,
Hold
you're
on,
better
let's-
than
let's
that.
be-
You really
let's-
are.
let's be
I didn't
real.
say
Like,
two.
oh god.
Yeah.
So it sounds
Go
like this land has been in your family for a long time. Like so you talked about how previously it was taken for like a highway, then again for they're looking at it for the Keystone Pipeline. So
Or like bridges to nowhere.
Realistically,
any other thing.
if this mob,
Whatever
right, if you
random
wanna call- if you wanna
caprice falls in
call-
some
if you want to call the
bureaucrat's
government a
head.
mob,
Just
that's
finish.
okay. If
Yeah.
you want to call the government a mob, that's okay, right? So if this mob wasn't protecting your land for you, wasn't saying, hey, if you go and take Phil's land, you're going to be put in a cell, you're going to be killed, right? People would have come along at some point in your family's history and snatched that fucking land up, right? So especially if you were a different skin color, that definitely would have happened. So you should be thankful
Oh,
at
wow.
some point to the wider society that protects you and your privileges, Phil. Absolutely, you should.
It's like a wife
I
beater
violated
saying that
my
a wife
property
should
rights.
be
Yeah.
thankful that he pays.
You
the
need
bills.
to kiss
Like,
the ring, Phil.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Can I want to say two things real quick. First thing, Wick, to the
Yeah,
proposed.
you're mistaking the government and the nation as the
We're-
two
we're-
different. They're two different things. They're not the same thing. It's why we have two different words.
They're absolutely the same.
2 points both to Wick. The first point,
Maybe
Wick,
the simple-minded.
to
Doobie.
your
Let him go. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Actor.
to your proposed the proposed like issue, I think the fact that it's by referendum solves the issue. I mean, if you have a group of people who vote on it by referendum and they want to pay for it, well then that's on them. If first of all they don't do the investigation first, And then also you could maybe like implement like standard fraud statute language in that. The other thing here is, kind of going to the point about like subjective value. Wick, I'm sure there are precious family photographs that you have laying around your house, and I think it'd be asinine to say, well, the fair value of that, well, we add up the price of the current paper, we add up like the ink, we come to like some kind of like value. This is what the value of this like photograph is, and we all know that's like just absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like the photograph of like my dead grandmother is worth far more than to me and everybody has experience where their photographs are worth more to them than just the paper it's printed on. Why can't homes be the same way, right? My childhood home, who are you to determine what the fair value of that is?
Okay.
Are you gonna?
Well, I'll
right?
address this. Sure, I'll address this. So if I have a family photograph, right, that could save lives, right, that could cure cancer for whatever reason, it's a magic fucking photograph, and then I refuse to sell it because, oh, it's just so precious to me, right? Then the government should, pay me a fair compensation for it, but they should be allowed to just say, no, you don't get to decide that for everyone else. We're going to take.
Wait. What if it's your organ? What if it's your organ that somebody else needs?
I love that you said
Again,
this.
it doesn't. Again,
because
this isn't required for me to live. Right, a photograph, right, is much different than an organ. So is a house. Right?
You can live off one kidney.
Yeah.
you know what you're describing?
You can live off half a liver too.
You're
you can live off a
Tell
two of
me
them.
what you think I'm describing.
Hold on.
But
Hogging two
again,
of them.
you are conflating things. We have a conflation crisis in politics.
But
You're
it's for the
conflating,
wider society, Wick.
like a
People are
house
gonna die.
Why are you
without your
hogging the
kidney.
extra
organs,
kidney?
right?
It's for the
And
wider
again, you can't
society.
replace organs are not fungible in the same way houses are. Right?
Gotta make
Just
it more
aren't.
no more new land.
Wick,
No,
Wick,
but that
Wick, hold
house
on.
is not
Listen,
replaceable.
real quick. What you're describing is the Ukrainian kulaks. That's what you're describing. You're describing farmland that they own and they're hoarding grain. And your property could actually save the lives of so many people. You're describing the thought process that led to the Holodomor, that led to
I am
genocide.
not advocating for killing anyone in any of these situations.
But you are. You're
It is kind of-
advocating for
Wow,
establishing
that's
a moral
wild.
norm
Let's
that
okay.
eventually
Hold on,
leads
Wick.
to
Bad
genocide.
What if I will die to take my house away from me?
A wildly hilarious bad faith interpretation.
Okay. Sorry. We don't have too much time left. Hold on. Shut up. Hey, you're not being accused of genocide, okay? All right, he was saying you're accusing of some. Okay, he didn't say you Wick committed genocide, okay? All right.
Right.
So I'll
I'm
let
saying it's the same moral norm and argument.
I'll let Doobie respond because he wants to say something. Then Corey, then Aiko quickly, but we do got to move on.
Mine's short.
Wait,
Yeah.
look, you gotta be honest, okay? We are in some ways advocating for killing these people. And so for example, if we needed to build a highway on Phil's family land, right? And Phil's family was like, "Hey, we're not going to sell this land," and the government was like, "Hey, fuck you guys. Here's a check. Fuck off. We're going to build on this land." If Phil was out there on what used to be his property with a gun, saying, "Hey, don't come on this fucking property, government," we'd probably either shoot Phil or put him in a cage somewhere, right? We absolutely would, and it would be justified, right? So in some ways, you are advocating for this. You got to be real about the consequences of what your policy positions are.
Doobie,
And it's just true.
No. We got to let him go.
And it's just true that if Phil resisted, we'd have to put him down, unfortunately. But shit happens.
Okay.
Your Phil KOE fan fiction is pretty fun.
We got so we got to move on. We got
logic is the
a little bit of
coolest.
time. Corey, go.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So, Scott, I think you mentioned, I can't remember the exact phrasing that you use of like, democracy is like the soft form of communism, something to that effect. Well, what's interesting, what's interesting is it seems like, this is where like, I think it seems like eminent domain just allows piss poor, solutions to be implemented, but it seems like I'm gonna put the link in the StreamYard that China, is able to like overcome this, where it seems like they're willing to like build around a house, where it's like this person want to move, well, okay, we'll just like build around the house. I don't see why like, and it seems like they're creative in that solution. Sure, this person now like just surrounded by highway, but I don't, Dwick, like I don't see why like the government just can't be creative with their
better
solutions.
than America. That's weird. That's a
Yes,
weird thing.
absolutely.
Okay.
In this instance,
It
I'll let you
happens
own that.
sometimes.
I'll let you own that. All you can own that. Okay. I'll let you ride that one into the ground. Go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily seem relevant to what I was saying, but I mean that's cool that China does a thing slightly better.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it seems like a communist nation is
yeah.
respecting property rights more than the United States. That's all.
Let's go to
Well, they're both
Ico.
socialist.
That's a sad indictment.
Yeah, so I just want to say, as the only panelist who's here from the future, I just want to say that as a result of this panel, 3 genocides occurred, and I'm heartily regretful of my comments in the past, like contributing to that. No, really, I just wanted to say, Phil, you talked about Keystone going through, it was supposed to go through your property. They weren't offering you a fair price for that. And that was presumably in the last 5 years, 6 years when that happened. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So before that, the Keystone wasn't going through, right? Because Obama was holding it up. Under the Trump administration, presumably that happened, right? But then Biden came in and saved your farm. Is that what you're telling me?
No, what I was saying is for about 6 weeks it was going to be going through, and then there was a lot of debate as to where it was going to go for a while, but for about 6 weeks we were told we were probably it, and then they moved on to somewhere else, and then Biden showed up. Now the thing is, broken watch is still right twice a day. I'll even say Biden stopping the Keystone XL pipeline, I'll give him two gold stars for that one, because tar sand, because the shale oil was not going to, there's going to be no bueno in the aquifer, and that's how I make my money, and that's how we all live, is off the Ogallala aquifer. So
you agree with the water keepers on that one?
You'd have to.
Okay, all right, yeah, that's fine. There was a group of Native Americans who were also trying to stop the pipeline, and it was for reasons of water. But the reason that was interesting to me is because I also know people at the border who voted for Trump, were very much for the wall or whatever, but then got eminent domain for the wall, and all of a sudden they were not as for it as they were before, and it was on the basis of property rights that occurred. So I think that sometimes our concept of how we can generalize individual rights that we like to reserve to ourselves, it can lead to like sort of some unintended consequences. Like we don't like, I'm not necessarily saying that they were like wrong for having their beliefs about immigration before, or that they were wrong for the way that their property rights sort of conflicted with those beliefs. But I think that both of those, like all of those examples, are why we might need to like sort of continually revisit our sort of political assumptions that we're making, because I don't know, because whenever those sorts of general political opinions touch on our personal lives, that tends to cause us to change our minds a lot faster than like any intellectual argument that people can bring to bear.
Very true, very true. But now I understand what you're getting at there, because like another personal story, like it was an executive order signed by Trump and an executive order signed by Biden that helped my nephew get the life-saving health care he needed to beat his pediatric cancer. And I don't know exactly how to think on that. You know what I mean? Because like my brother hated Trump, and me, I was not a huge fan of Biden, and we both kind of had to have a about that one. So yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of the Keystone Pipeline, whatever preserves groundwater, I'm always for.
All right. We did it. Hooray. All right. So we'll move on to the next topic. Before then, guys, if you've been enjoying this content, hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on. I'm going live. Do this all the time. !for social chat for all our social media.